5 cognitive biases everyone should know about. Number 5. Illusion of control. The illusion of control is the tendency for people to overestimate their ability to control events. For example, it occurs when someone feels a sense of control over outcomes that they demonstrably do not influence. This bias is thought to influence gambling behavior and belief in the paranormal. The illusion might arise because people lack direct introspective insight into whether they are in control of events. In one study, college students were in a virtual reality setting to treat fear of heights using an elevator. Those who were told that they had control yet had none felt as though they had as much control as those who actually did have control over the elevator. Those who were led to believe they did not have control, but in fact they did, said they were terrified inside the elevator and felt as though they had no control over the situation. Number 4. Illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect, also known as the validity effect, is the tendency to believe certain information is correct after repeated exposure to a claim. When the truth is assessed, people rely on whether the information is in line with their understanding or if it feels familiar. The first condition is logical, as people compare new information with what they already know to be true. But repetition makes statements easier to process relative to new unrepeated statements, leading people to believe that a repeated conclusion is more truthful. The truth effect is a phenomenon which people have been familiar with for millennia. One study notes that the Roman statesman Cato closed each of his speeches with a call to destroy Carthage, knowing that the repetition would breed agreement. The truth effect plays a significant role in various fields of our lives. For example, during election campaigns, false information about a candidate, if repeated in TV commercials, can cause the public to believe it because viewers may come to think that they've heard the claims from an objective source. Number 3. Neglect of probability. The neglect of probability is the tendency to disregard probability when making a decision under uncertainty, and is one simple way in which people regularly violate the normative rules for decision-making. Small risks are typically either neglected entirely or hugely overrated, and the continuum between the extremes is ignored. In a 1972 experiment, participants were divided into 2 groups. The first group was told they would receive a mild electric shock, and the second group was told that there was a 50% chance they would receive such a shock. When the subject's physical anxiety was measured, there was no difference between the 2 groups. This lack of difference remained even when the second group's chance of being shocked was lowered to 20%, then 10, and then 5. The conclusion? We respond to the expected magnitude of an event, but not to its likelihood. In other words, we lack an intuitive grasp of probability, and thus distinguish poorly among different threats. Number 2. Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is the logical error of concentrating on things that made it past some selection process and overlooking those that did not. Survivorship bias can lead to overly optimistic beliefs because failures are ignored. This can lead to false conclusions in several different ways. For example, during World War II, the statistician Abraham Wald took survivorship bias into his calculations when considering how to minimize bomber losses to enemy fire. Researchers from the Center for Naval Analyses had conducted a study of the damage done to aircraft that had returned from missions and had recommended that armor is added to the areas that showed the most damage. Wald noted that the study only considered the aircraft that had survived their missions, and the bombers that had been shot down were not present for the damage assessment. The holes in the returning aircraft then represented areas where a bomber could take damage and still return home safely. Wald proposed that the Navy reinforce areas where the returning aircraft were unscathed, since those were the areas that, if hit, would cause the plane to crash. Wald saved countless lives by taking into consideration the survivorship bias. Before we get to number 1, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified for new videos. Number 1. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. It is a type of cognitive bias and a systematic error of inductive reasoning. People display this bias when they remember information selectively. The effect is stronger for emotionally charged issues and for deeply entrenched beliefs. Confirmation bias is of particular current interest because of the increasing polarization between left-wing and right-wing political viewpoints, and the gullible acceptance of the current rapid spread of fake news. Confirmation biases contribute to overconfidence in personal beliefs and can maintain or even strengthen beliefs in the face of contrary evidence, thus leading to poor decision-making.